if assurance is a message, I think influence is the art of making sure that the message is heard or understood or acted upon. And I think it's the quiet leadership that shapes culture, strengthens governance, and politely nudges, the executives without ever having to say a word or having to raise your voice.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Audit Podcast. I'm your host, Trent Russell. Today on the show, we have Shagen Ganason. He is the Group Head of Internal Audit, Chief Audit Executive at Liva Group. He was also former member of the Institute Relations Committee for the IIA Global, and he is currently the author of the Storyteller's Ledger. So as you might imagine, a lot of the conversation, pretty much the entire conversation, is around the book, the Storyteller's Ledger. Highly recommend it. We have had a lot of authors on the show, so I've gotten a lot of books around audit. We read them, formulate questions around those, and this was probably one of the more impactful ones, I think, that anyone in the audit profession, honestly, otherwise, should pick up and read and apply as well. I say apply because there are the templates and the process for how to do what Shagen talks about is in the book. And so it's not, I've read a lot of these kind of books that you get at the airport is what I call them, in the business section, and you read them and there's kind of motivational and maybe it helps with your mindset, but you get done and it's like there's nothing practical in here. There's like some good quotes, but like I can't do anything with what's in here. There's not a step-by-step guide. That's not the case in this book. And largely what it centers around is how to effectively tell stories of we can call them audit findings at a high level, how to present to the board as a way to think about it, or the audit committee as well, through storytelling. And storytelling, the art of it has been around forever. The science has been around for years and years and years and years and years. Also, especially around movies, it's always kind of a hot topic. We talked about that briefly in the episode. But anyway, I can't recommend it enough. Seriously, go buy it, read it. And follow it, and I promise you will have a better report or a better presentation the next time you have one. Specifically, some of the things that we do though is we pull up so again, if you're watching this on YouTube, you will see this. If not, you can switch over to the YouTube channel and check it out there. But we asked to pull up a traditional audit report, and then pull up the new way that Shagen recommends using storytelling, and which I will say now I recommend as well, using storytelling. And so we compare and contrast the two side by side. You can see the difference between those two. And so I think that's very powerful. You can see like this is probably how most audit departments do it, kind of the 5 C's way of doing things. I know not everybody does that. Literally every audit department does something a little bit different with their audit reports. And so of course it's not going to be exactly the same as yours, but you get the general idea. And then how to take that and then translate it into a story that's going to be significantly more impactful. And then within that, we also talk about like, how do you share these stories? Is it in just the report, like you type it up? Do you do it verbally with the audit committee, use of data visualizations, all that kind of good stuff? And then one of the quotes, or rather the lines from the book, and I'll read it directly now, it's really short, was when Shagen said the final 60 seconds might matter more than anything that came before it. And so we talk about the importance of closing and how to do that, which Shagen also hits at in the book. Like literally, he tells you how to do all this in the book. So again, it's on Amazon, the Storyteller's Ledger. Definitely go check it out. There's a link in the show notes. If you're lazy or you forget, you can just click that link. It'll take you to that. The last thing we end with is how Shagen coaches his teams, i.e. how you can coach your teams how to do this. So if you are one of the people who listen to this, you read the book and you go, yep, we need to implement this. Shagen talks about his process for how he's taught his teams how to do the exact same thing. Here we go. Hey, everybody. Before we go to the show, quick announcement. On September 24th and 25th, 2025, we'll be having the Audit Analytics and AI Conference. So block your calendars. It's going to be between 9 and 4 Central. That's 9 and 4 Chicago time. So again, that's September 24th and 25th. If you're in your car right now, probably want to pull over. Go ahead and put that in your calendar. Save the date there. More to come from us, but want to let you know, save the date, September 24th, September 25th, 9 to 4 Central. So, Shagen, what's in your internet browsing or ChatGPT, Copilot history, anything like that? Just anything personal and professional, maybe not too personal, but personally, professionally, that you've been kind of looking into recently.
Well, friend, my Chat GPT history is pretty boring. I break it down into two, professionally and personally, right? So professionally is filled with riveting searches like risk and insurance, audit frameworks, and how not to bore your audit
Nice.
committee, stuff like that. From a personal perspective, it swings wildly between planning a holiday an imaginary holiday that I never take, or never seem to book, to reading about historical events that I already know, and also looking up recipes that I have no intentions
So
of
it's kind of
cooking.
like it's
And I think,
kind of like YouTube for me then, especially on the recipes thing. Like, yeah, I'll watch this very beautifully produced how to cook whatever, and I'm like, oh, this video is amazing, and that looks amazing, and then inevitably I go, I'm never gonna make this.
yeah, there are no
Yeah,
conspiracy theories,
nice.
no secret societies, but something comes up, and I said, hey, what do I do with this recipe, this ingredient? And I'll search it up, and
Yeah.
that's where it
Well,
ends.
what's the I think the
Pretty
well, you
boring.
said how not to bore the audit committee. That was something that you put in there. I think that's pretty interesting. Anything good come of there that you could share?
Oh yeah, it talks about stuff like, let them know what you think is important to them. Tells you not to bore them with details because they need to be at a higher level. Lots of theoretical stuff, and lots of stuff which I think a lot of other auditors have tried and tested. They're really good. It's just that you read one and you read another, it sounds pretty much the same thing. I mean, it's
Got it.
just packaged differently. I
Yeah.
think that's what
Okay.
ChatGPT does.
Um, so obviously the book is kind of the cornerstone of what we're talking about. And as I was reading through it, there was just well, there's a bunch, but some of my favorite kind of quotes. And one I just wanted to read very short and then kind of throw it to you and have you expand on that. But in there, it's pretty early on, maybe within the first chapter or two, you say audit isn't just about assurance, it's about influence. I just wanted you to kind of expand on that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So audit has long outgrown the idea of providing assurance. That's my view. And I think while assurance remains sort of like a passport into the room, I think influence determines whether you stay in a room or whether you get invited back into the room. I mean, if you put it that way. To me, a good auditor does not just point out what went wrong, but he or she also needs to share what what is right and what management needs to know. And I think from our work as auditors, we influence how leaders think about risk, how to prioritize change, how to make decisions, especially under pressure. And I think a strong audit not only highlights gaps, but it subtly steers the organization and the executives towards better practices, making better decisions, and stronger controls. And to me, put it an analogy, if assurance is a message, I think influence is the art of making sure that the message is heard or understood or acted upon. And I think it's the quiet leadership that shapes culture, strengthens governance, and politely nudges the executives without ever having to say a word or having to raise your voice. And if you look at it in another analogy that I just thought of, it's a lighthouse without a beam, right? Technically, it's still standing, but not much use to anyone unless lost at sea unless the lights are on. So similar, and assurance is like it's be a lighthouse being there, and the influence is actually turning the lights on so that people can see,
Yeah.
so that you don't get
Nice.
lost.
And
If
maybe
that makes
maybe the
sense.
most softball question ever on the show is if we said, "How do you do that?" Do we point them to the storyteller's ledger right here and say, "Read the book"? I mean, we're gonna get into some of it today, but if you wanna really know how to do it, that's probably your best option, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of examples in there. Yeah, real examples that I've done in the last 30 years by
Excellent.
mistakes as
Alright,
well.
speaking of examples, um, so I'd ask because I thought what would be really good is take this, what we'll just call traditional way of doing audit reporting and then basically apply your way of doing it through storytelling and then show that to folks so they can see kind of the contrast between the two. So I'm going to share my screen real quick For those that are watching on YouTube, you can see what we're talking about right here. We'll try for the audio folks to make it as easy as possible to kind of understand it as well. So let me just quickly describe this as we get it pulled up. Hey, everybody, we're going to take a quick break from our guests. And if you need to get analytics or AI actually working in your internal audit department, or if you already have some of it, you feel like you're not really getting exactly what you need out of it, you know there's more, you're not getting that, go to the show notes, look for the Green Skies Analytics link, click it. On the website, there'll be other links that you can click that'll take you directly to a calendar to schedule time. It's literally 3 clicks to get the time scheduled, to get it figured out. All right, back to the show. All right, so basically what we're looking at is we have this PDF that we're sharing. On the left hand, there's 2 columns. The left one is the traditional audit finding format. So it's got the kind of your 5 C's, or here we have condition, criteria, cause, effect, recommendation, and then obviously all the text for those. And on the right, we have the story-based audit finding, or the narrative format. So that's setting, building tension, turning point, and resolution. And so basically at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Shagen and have you walk us through this example and kind of compare and contrast the two. And like you said, in the book, there's more of these. So I highly recommend it. I feel like the more examples you can get, the better on something like this. So anyway, with that said, I'm going to pass it over to you, Shagen. Walk us through what we're looking at here.
Yeah, so this is an example that I picked up from the book. So basically, it's a typical audit finding where someone would write, and if you look at how you would typically write an audit finding, it's you start with a condition or sometimes criteria and then condition, and then we look at the cause, the effect, and the recommendation. That's the standard way of writing reports. But if you look at the way that you traditionally write a report, it's factually correct. It's not wrong, but it doesn't hook you in from the first sentence. It's rather um, it's rather dry, if you call it that, and because it basically tells you, what you found, what do you expect to see, and what was the reason behind it, and it's pretty shallow. But if you look at it on from a storytelling perspective, if you look at the story arc, any good story would have a context, would have a setting. It's that, if you look at any movies or any stories that you've come across, and then usually there's a tension that's being built. It creates an uncertainty, creates some sort of conflict or things like that. And then there is a turning point where things start to materialize and becomes clearer as to why there was a tension, and then you find a resolution. And if you follow the story arc, it goes up and it comes down. So the finding that I have got up here is like, um, setting the context basically means that, what did you see, and you put it in a story form so that you hook the reader right from the beginning. Like in this case, we talk about a recent expansion that created a parts warehouse having issues with the inventory, and there could be a whole lot of reason why that inventory happens. And then you find that, building tension, you identify things like there were pressure. The staff in the warehouse were under a lot of pressure, and as a result of that, they did this and they did manual workarounds and they did a lot of things which creates the tension. And then comes the turning point where, as a result of all these things, they lost $2 million. That is a big thing which somebody would hook on to, and they want to find out what happens next. What do we need to do? What do we need to resolve that? And then you come down to the resolution part of it. If you follow the story and if you follow how a story arc actually works, you go beyond what a traditional audit finding does, because it identifies the root cause, which is a lot more subtle. It is not so obvious. Like, for example, in this case, if you read the book, you'll find that the actual root cause was the cultural issue about people wanting to make the good choice of manual overrides. Obviously, it has caused a lot of issues, but if you do it in a traditional form, you will not find those cultural issues. Basically, it's black and white. Is binary, either this or that, and that's the beauty of using a
What's
storytelling
the
way.
for those that go, hey, my audit committee, auditees, whoever you want to, how you want to refer to them, they're used to condition, criteria, cause, effect, recommendation in that order, spelled out like that. And now, Shagan, you're saying basically change that. Do you have any advice for how to basically sell this idea to them, to the stakeholders, and go, look, we get it. We've always done it like that. Now we're going to do it this way. And then, even with that said, I guess the second part of that, in the audit report itself, would you lay it out? And so instead of having like condition, would you write setting? I mean, I'm sure you wouldn't write building tension, but I'm trying to imagine. I've seen so many. I'm not even like an audit report writing, consultant. I'm all data and tech. But even then, I've seen a lot of audit reports, and I've talked to a lot of audit report trainers and consultants, and it seems like every audit department does something a little bit different. So how can you take their traditional way of doing it and then putting it into, and we'll just stick with the text format in this example, but how can they then like reformat it to where again stakeholders can take that in, and it's not like what is this, this is totally different, I don't get any of this. I'm sure they're going to get some level of pushback from somebody on the committee, but what advice would you give there?
What I did was, normally what most auditors would do is to have those headings, condition, criteria, cause, effect, recommendation, which are normally what how you structure an audit report. What I did was slowly remove the heading and left condition, criteria, the way that I write a traditional audit report. And then you find that people get used to not seeing those headings. And then when you change things around and not putting in, context and building tension and all that, but you still write a report as how you would write, because the recommendation is at the end. And the first part of it, the context, your building tension and all that builds up together with your condition and criteria. That is a story in itself. And if you look at the next page, where in the screen that you have, that is actually an audit finding. So you will not see the headings, but if you read through that finding, you'll find that it is actually how a traditional audit report used to look like, but it's written in a different format. And what is good about this is that it's very rarely I've come across an audit committee or a senior executive which finds it difficult to understand that, because the first paragraph itself, it hooks the reader into saying that I want to know what's happening next. I want to know what's causing this. And then as they start reading into the second or third paragraph, and then that's basically they want to know what the ending is. It's just like if you go into a movie and you go halfway through the movie, you can't stop it because you want to know what the ending is. So it is written in such a way that it actually still captures the whole thing. Factually, it's still exactly the same as what the traditional audit report is, but it's written in a format where it hooks somebody, and the moment you start reading it, you forget that that the structure is
And
missing.
I can imagine, because from experience, we used to take all the audit reports across, all the various areas we were auditing. And so what we go to the audit committee, what they wanted was we want the cause and we want the recommendation. And so we did that for years. Like that's all they wanted. Just
Yeah,
give us that and that for everything. All right, cool. And then eventually someone new came on the audit committee and that person said, that's great, I want the effect also. It's like, okay, so one of like, six people on this committee wants this. So we went, all right. So now so now we had the effect to it also. So I just could see, especially with so many people in the room going, well, I want this way and I want it this way and I want it this way. And so even I think you might have to get creative for some folks. Even as I was looking at on the first page where you had a few areas kind of underlined and your attention does go there, like that's immediately I
yeah.
opened it, I saw the underlining, I went straight there. And so that could be, what do you think? A technique for someone goes, look, I just want the effect. And you go, cool, we're going to do it in this story format, and then maybe just kind of underline that piece of it so that it draws their attention to that. So if anyone just wants that, they can go there. What do you think about that? Anything that you would add to that, or just go, dude, that is a terrible idea. Just do what I'm telling you to do, and it's gonna be fine.
No, I think every audit committee is different, as you put it, and you got to know your audit committee. Got to know your audience as to what they want. And the purpose of me underlining those little text is essentially so that you can actually see on the screen. But what I normally do is I put it bold, so anything that I want people to pick up from on a bunch of text, I'll normally make it bold, so that your eyes automatically gets attracted to that part of the thing. And typically you put things like $2 million. It's a huge thing that somebody would automatically want to pick up. If you make it bold, it will stand out. And like you said, the cause and the effect is absolutely important. You want to know why something happened, and as a result of that, what is the consequence to the company. And if you made those things in bold, I think it's very powerful. But if underlining works, go for it. I mean, the thing is, at the end of the day, we're trying to sell an idea, and we want to make sure it sticks. How it's presented is immaterial, as long as the risk is presented in such a way that your audience understands it
There's been a
and they
lot of
accept it.
studies, or some studies, on where they literally put retina reading cameras on people's laptops and screens, and then they would pull something like this up, and then they would just see like where does someone's eyes naturally go. And so even as I look at the top, there's some areas bolded there, but then obviously like I was talking about, and then you have headings bolded in the body of it, and then you have the underlining. My eyes, like for whatever reason, they went straight to the underline. And so I'd say there's various techniques that people can use to draw attention to a certain spot of a written report. Dashboards is really where they did a lot of this research to see, hey, where do eyes go? You just pull up a dashboard. Where does someone's eyes go first? For whatever it's worth, red was. If there's something red on there, and that's the only thing red, people's eyeballs are immediately going to go there. Um, so anyway, there's various
Yeah,
techniques to do that for
that's
those
true.
that need to look into that a little bit more. But that does kind of bring me to the next thing. And how are these communicated? So is it um, obviously here we have kind of a written format that people can share, but then
Mhm.
when you present to the audit committee, is it just, hey, we're going to take all these narratives, we're going to, put them together in a binder and hand those over? Or when you're presenting to the audit committee, do you go, all right, here's the two, like we had, make up a number, 50 findings this quarter, however, whenever the cadence is to present. These two are the ones that are just like absolutely critical. We have to talk about those. Do you then take those and do the more narrative storytelling where it's more verbal? Where does data visualizations come into play into kind of your process? Just overall, how do these get presented across the multiple stakeholders, from the person executing on the control, the person who that they report to, senior management, and then maybe the board or audit committee? What does that look like?
I think we have moved on from the time when we used to present an audit pack, which is probably 100 pages long. My audit pack these days are probably 10 to 15 pages. And I think one of the things that we need to understand is every audience is different. Um, Understanding your audience is the key, so that then you'll be able to craft your message according to each wants and needs. And also, it's important to note that one format is not going to work for everyone else. In some of my audit committees, I tend to do um, graphs and in a pictorial format. And some of my audit committee members are more word focused, so they don't like to see pictures, they don't like to see colors, they like to see text. So you got to understand who you're presenting to, and I think one of the critical part is that if you are able to if you are going to present to lower management, I would have probably have more details in it. So the report would probably be 10, 15 pages long, depending on how many issues you have. But if you're presenting it to the executives, it might be a little bit shorter. They are more interested in the executive summary, what caused the issue rather than what the issue actually was, and also what is the impact to the business. And if you're looking at it from an audit committee perspective, they are even at a higher level. And the thing about audit committees is that every audit committee member brings a different skill set. In my audit committee, I've got investors, I've got lawyers, I've got accountants, I've got regulators or ex-regulators. So they all have a different perspective. And I think you as a CAE needs to understand what their needs are, and also need to be able to preempt what kind of questions they're going to ask. And for you to be able to present your audit committee deck in a way that answers the questions even before they ask it. And if you are able to do that, then you have really, mastered it. But it's difficult. You need to understand your audit committee. It takes time for you to understand the audit committees. And normally, if you have like 10, 15 findings in a report, I would normally highlight
Mhm.
maybe the top two or three of them, the one that has got the most impact, because the audit committee, again, you're looking at the risk, right, for the whole organization, which has got the biggest risk, which has got the biggest impact to the business. And that's what they are interested in terms of fines or penalties from the regulators. Those are very important to some audit committees. So you bring up those things and you point it out rather than putting issue by issue. And sometimes what I also do is I'll summarize the 15 findings into maybe two or three key paragraphs. Rather than putting it finding by finding, I summarize the whole thing into two or three paragraphs and say that these are the three things that you need to be aware of. These are the three things that you need to ask management. These are the three things that you should be looking out for when you're assessing the risks.
When we
And that
talk
really works really
to
well.
CAEs about their audit committee materials, because we'll help put together for them data visualizations, all that kind of good stuff. We'll talk to them and go, well, what does the audit committee want to see? And they're like, a lot of times they go, I don't know. Like, just go ask them, like, how do you want to see this? Like, what do you want to know? Do you want to know everything? Do
Yeah.
you just want to know the top, two breath, or, whatever? I wouldn't necessarily put a number on it, but, and even as you're talking, I'm thinking like, okay, let's do a visual. option for them. Let's do a summarized option for them. Let's do a detailed option, like almost lay it out. And then I think it's extremely fair to go to them and go, hey, we're trying to make this the best possible solution for you. Here's your options. Like, what do you want to see from now on? And so, at a minimum, even if you don't do that, I think it makes a ton of sense to put on the agenda or like call your audit committee chair, the audit committee members, and just ask them, how do you want this presented from now on? Is there anything that we're not doing? And probably do that with each time you get someone new on there, bring it up to them. I think it also shows that you're empathizing with them and that you're working with them to make it better. And I think they would appreciate it if as a relationship builder as well.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, not to undermine the audit committees, and I think there is also an fair element of us educating the audit committees, because not every audit committee member has got the same kind of experience. And for us to be able to educate them and say that this is what you need to be looking at, these are the kind of questions that you need to be asking. And from my experience, I've found that some audit committee members, especially people who are new onto the audit committee space, they value that a lot because you have been there and you've done that and you have sat in multiple audit committees, and being able to help them behind the scenes and tell them this is what you should be looking at, this is what would help you in terms of your decision making. That really helps. It also
Yeah.
builds the relationship bit
Yeah.
because then they kind
Yeah.
of
And you
trust
guys are
you.
kind of on the same level almost. Like we're helping you, you help us, we're helping you instead of just, okay, let me report to you and like almost bow down to whatever it is that you need. I like that perspective. So the other thing that we really try to do on this show is when there is something, because like, I mean, there's literally an entire book written about what we're talking about, and to try to take the kind of the 80-20 approach of what's the one or two things that's going to make the biggest difference. And you made it pretty easy. When, again, another quote from the book, you say, the final 60 seconds might matter more than anything that came before it. And so immediately I read that and I went, all right, well, we're going to talk about that. Like if that's the thing, maybe if we call that the one thing that we have to nail amongst all of this, then I want to make sure we hit on that. So you talk about basically it's how to close and the importance of that. So again, just kind of I'll throw the microphone to you and let you just expand on that. I'll let you go on that.
Yeah. I think the final 60 seconds or the final minute is where all the magic is. Or on the flip side, where the damage could potentially happen. No matter how good the audit was, no matter how many pages that you presented, how thorough your evidence, and or how elegant your report is, it is often the closing that actually sticks in people's mind. And I've presented decks to my audit committee, 15 pages long, and you go through all the details and you tell them your scope and you tell them your methodology and how you arrive at those things. But it is the end part of it is what basically people remember. And I think closing well is about leaving a clear and a confident message without rushing, without rambling, and also introducing any last minute doubts in people's minds. It is the moment to sharpen your message, not to soften it, because you really want people to remember what you have just said. It also gives you an opportunity for you to summarize the key risks that you're trying to convey, and reinforces the real world impact. I think that's pretty important. And I think the most important part of it is to make it clear that what needs to happen next. Basically, you've presented all these things, and this is what the issue is. What needs to happen after this? And I think people rarely remember every slide, or every point that you have made during a meeting, but they will remember how you made them feel, how reassured they were at the end of the meeting, how alarmed they were. I mean, if there was a cause for alarm, or how inspired they were based on the good things that's happening in the business, or even worse, if how confused they were. So basically, you want to balance that out. And I think a strong case um, ties everything together, frames the way forward, and also leaves no one guessing what the next steps will be. It's a bit like, as auditors, we take flights all over the world, all the time, right? So we're familiar with flights taking off and landing, and you can have the best food on the plane, you can have the best seat on the aircraft, but the landing is where it really matters. I mean, if you had a really butter smooth landing, you'll have the best flight ever. But if it was a botched landing, or if it was windy or whatever it is, whatever happened in the past, in the 2 hours flight, you completely forget about
Yeah.
it, but you remember the landing. So to me, that's what if you look at it as an analogy, I think um, closing the last 60 seconds is the most important part of the delivery because
Yeah.
that's
Don't
what
crash
people
and burn.
remember.
I think we summarize that. I just have this image of planes just like going down now. All right. That is a really good analogy, and there's a lot of good. Like I can pick up on the storytelling that you speak to in the book because you do it really seemingly naturally as we're talking through this. Like, but just the visual of that in my head will probably stick with me more so than anything else that we've talked about so far. I think everything we've talked about has been great and actionable, and there's a lot that the listeners can take from this. But I don't think I'll ever be able to get the idea of whenever there's the close to a meeting of this vision in my head of just a plane just straight nose diving and blowing up. So thank you for sharing that. Um, I do know there's a lot of what I feel like probably the best auditors that I know are the ones who will pick up this book and read it, or pick up a Norman Marks book or a Richard Chambers book or something like that and read that. Not to say that those that don't aren't great also, but the ones that do, I can usually tell like, all right, you're pretty good. You take this pretty serious, if nothing else, or you're genuinely curious about how to be better at the position. But of course, there's going to be people who aren't for whatever reason. Maybe this, maybe an audio or video version of what we're talking about is good enough for them, and that's how they do things. And reading text or a book isn't really their thing. So all that to say, there's some that are going to read this and they're going to take off with it, and they're going to help kind of implement it throughout their teams also. For those people, how can they coach the rest of their teams to go, I read this is how we're going to implement. How do you coach your teams to do this? Do you just like force everyone to read it? How do you
Well, yeah, not so harsh. Normally, what when my team presents an audit finding where they've done an audit, they will have most of the time structured in a way, the traditional way. The first question I ask is, what does the whole finding tell you? What is the story behind this? What would someone look at and see, and how does it impact them? And I try to take away clutter, jargon, and basically, you don't want to bury the key message that you have in, the third paragraph or the fourth paragraph. And if you find that is something really critical, something that you really want people to know, bring it up front. And that is a good way of starting it. So I had a template, and in the book I've explained the tips how I created that. So basically, what I do is that any finding itself, take it up and put it aside, and then don't read the finding itself, but ask questions like, what does this mean to me? What does this mean to the business? What is the two or three key things that I want to talk about? And what are the two, two or three key things that stands out? And you pull that up front and you write the first paragraph. Forget about the structure of, condition and criteria and all that. Write the first two or three key things in the first paragraph, and then say that what did it cost? What consequence did it cause to the business? And as a result of that, what would the business have lost or gained as a result of that? And then what can you do to resolve that? So if you follow that structure, you find that you automatically start to create a story arc. And when you start reading it the next day, normally what I'll do is I'll write something up, I'll leave it, even though it's written by somebody else. But the best thing is to put it aside and come back again the next day and read through it again. And you'll find that you pick up things that you never picked up the day before. And that gives you your mind to start working the scenes. It's just like if you're reading a book, you start to create visual pictures in your mind, just like the plain story that you just said. So if you read the book read the finding the second day, and if you can create a mental picture of what the issue is all about, then you have started the journey about storytelling. And I think that's the thing. That's the training that I give my teams. Most people get it after a few times if you follow a structure. But if you just randomly start writing, I mean, it's difficult because we are auditors and we are trained to write in such a way for years, right? And for us to just flip, it's not easy. We're not John Grisham or Yi Chao or any of those authors.
So the advice is procrastinate. Yeah, I like that. I
It
can do that.
helps. Yeah.
I can do that. All right. I think the other thing I like about this, especially for those that get the book, you talk about the templates. And so basically it's not, hey, you have to go take some story. There's tons of storytelling, like go just storytelling training for for executives, for actors, for directors, for script, like whatever it is. It's almost, I think, a joke amongst like the Hollywood folks about storytelling at this point. But so there's tons of trainings that you can go take to do all this storytelling. But what you're saying is basically, or what I'm going to say for you, get the book, the templates are in there, the questions that you need to ask of yourself and of your team are in there, and the process is in there also. So basically in the book, which takes, a few hours to read, like you can go through, read it, knock it out, pull out what you need to make this work for your team. And then really not stop providing assurance, but in addition to that, actually influence the folks that you need to. This is probably the most common way I close out the show, and so people are probably tired of hearing about it, but I absolutely love it when there are actionable, practical takeaways that people can listen to, and in this one especially, look at on the YouTube channel and see the before and after traditional versus storytelling way of doing this, as well as, again, pick up the book. It'll tell you how to do all this and save you probably hours and hours and hours of training. But so anyway, with that said, thank you so much for the book and for coming on. And I want to leave it to you though. What do you want to leave the audience with?
Um, if I could leave the audience with one thing, it would be this. Life is too short to take yourself too seriously. And or to trust a 5-minute recipe that ends up taking 2 hours and half of your patience. I think on a personal note, most of the best things in life, to me, come from a bit of chaos, missed flights, unexpected career turns, half-baked ideas that somehow become full journeys. And even writing this book, for example, which started as a small side project, to clear my head, somehow or other snowballs into this very reason I'm here talking to you. So proof that sometimes chaos has a pretty good sense of humor. So whether you're chasing a promotion or your personal best or the world's best street food, just remember, I think enjoy the detours, pack a sense of humor, and stop to pet the dog, even if it's not yours.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Audit Podcast. Whatever platform you're listening on right now, I'm sure there's a subscribe button somewhere, so please hit the subscribe button there. If you're listening through iTunes or Spotify, feel free to go give us that 5-star rating. It only took me about 16 seconds to give myself a 5-star review, and it really helps to get future guests to come on the show, so we'd really appreciate that. Lastly, be sure to check out the show notes and follow us on all our social media channels on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on TikTok. Also, if interested, please sign up for our weekly newsletter from the Audit Podcast. Thank you all. Have a great one.